This is Founder Leroon. Happy post 4th of July. Today I'm going to be talking about the effects automation that you can potentially set up or have handy when you are going to be playing with Fantasy Grounds. Since I know a lot of you have gone out and bought a lot of content through the summer sale. It's still going, by the way, for about another week or so. So I want to talk about some things that will be required or needed if you're going to go this route. So what I mean by that is there's some prerequisites to this. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I'm going to try to go through this as slow as I can and kind of explain what this stuff does and why you would have it and that sort of thing. So first things first, we're going to assume that you have Fantasy Grounds and at least a standard license. And then you're going to need at least the player's handbook. So those are the bare minimums if you're going to be doing this kind of thing. The next thing is you're going to need something like the Rob2e coding effects automation. So you can buy them in pieces or you can buy them as a set. I recommend at least getting the bundle, which is a combination of things, but the most important parts of this would be the spells, class features, race traits, and the feats. Those are probably the most important parts of building characters with automatic automation. So in other words, when we get this all through, this stuff will add to your character sheets automatically as you're building. Now, you don't have to do this. You can certainly do the old drag and drop method where you drag the effect onto your actions tab in your character sheet. But in this case, if you want to make sure that everything gets added or most things gets added to your character, some of this stuff is required. Now, this stuff is not free. It is paid. One of the bundles that I'd recommend was the Rob2e all the codes bundle. It's around $135. It's on sale. I have all of these, so it's not going to cost me anything, but essentially it contains all of the things I had mentioned before, plus the stuff for the weapons and magic items and potions and rings and all those things too. So those are important add-ons that will help with the automation part if you have equipment that has magical effects or some sort of way of adding automation to your actions tab on your character sheet. So we're going to go through that, but this is one of the main prerequisites. So without this, nothing happens. So unless you can code or set up your own automation for Fantasy Grounds, then these will help you a lot. There's nothing saying that you can't go into the effects wiki on the Atlassian page. So I'm going to go to the Fantasy Grounds Atlassian, and I want to show you there is an article that will help you with the automation effects. So essentially what Rob has done, and also there's another group from Grim Press that also does a similar thing where they've taken a lot of the workload and they've added it to a Modsword extension so that it's easier for people that don't want to spend the time figuring it out and to be added to your actions tab. So this kind of adds a little bit more depth and automation to your gameplay so that you can take advantage of the power of Fantasy Grounds. Some of this stuff is not incorporated in the base program for one reason or another, but there's a whole article on here about effects and how you can set them up. This explains how they work and also gives you a list of things to check out at the end, where that tells you what all the definitions are for all the acronyms and the syntax, and then it gives you a table of what things are called or what conditions are, and then what they do to your character. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. So you can do this yourself without having to purchase anything. You just have to figure out how to implement it with your characters and take the time to input it and also kind of learn what this stuff does. So there is that option. You don't have to pay anything to do it. Anyone can do this. It just takes time and a little effort. So I wanted to put that out there first before I really get into all this paid content, because some people don't want to spend more money on top of what they've already spent. So I understand that. But again, you'd get these Rob2e coding effects, and they get installed on your Fantasy Grounds copy through this folder in the back. So if you click on this link and you go to modules, anything that you've purchased off the DM's Guild that are mod files, which are the Fantasy Grounds versions of the modules, you put those back in there, and then you're going to start up a new campaign. And this is the DnD5e rule set. So some of this stuff doesn't work with the other rule sets, but I'm mainly focusing on 5e because that's what I know best, and I know the codes, the automation is set up for that rule set. There are other solutions for other platforms and other games, but they're different. They don't work the same way because of the way they're set up. But there are options for them too. Pathfinder 2 has a lot of it built into the rule set, so it's kind of depends on the rule set. So you put all the modules in the modules folder, and there's one more module that I recommend that Matakure has made, and it's for basically the link from the books that you're going to be adding from. So what it does is it adds the link, so it will provide you a link fill for that. So I'm going to go to that extension or this module. This is by Matakure, and it's kind of supplemental to the Fantasy Grounds effects. So what this does is it pulls the description or the power entry. If you're going to use the Rob2e coding packages, it pulls it in the description part. Otherwise, you won't have the description. You'll just have the function. So if you have the books loaded in Fantasy Grounds, like the Player's Handbook or whatever book you're working with, it will pull the descriptions from there. And that's an important piece of this. They can't provide the descriptions because they can't include any of the descriptive text for the spells and powers and such. So the extension kind of helps automate that process. It pulls the information from the books and puts it into your powers as you're building your character sheet. So you want to have that as well. So those will go into your, this one goes into your extension folder. It's one of the few that's not on the DM's Guild or the it's not on the Fantasy Grounds Forge yet, so you'll have to get it from here. But it is an important piece to this puzzle. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, so you just got to kind of bear with me. So first things first is you're getting Rob2e's coding effects modules. Then you can get the link fill. This is actually can be free, or you can donate however you think it's worth. It's suggested at $5, but you know you could pay pretty much anything you want. Rob2e stuff is got a cost to it. That was because of the initial effort to convert all of the spells, all the feats, all the racial traits, all that stuff into a format, into the coding effects automation, so that it'd be easier to use during your games and such. And this puts a lot of more work onto the players and a little less onto the GM, which is good. The other thing is that, you know, some of these are paid. Like this is the Rob2e module updater. I don't know if this has been updated recently, but basically this will help keep the Rob2e modules updated automatically. And it allows you to any or only certain campaigns without having to clutter for a module activation window. So that kind of helps with that. So there's a lot of little pieces here that can, you know, that really can help with this process. So it just depends on what your needs are. And then you have these Nomad things. So you need the core. These will add the effects to your sheet automatically. The other stuff supplements it. And then you have not only that, but there's also the upgrader, and then there is another one. Let's see, there is the automatic actions, which is another piece that will add all these things to your character sheet automatically. So this is something that helps when you're building your characters. So just so you know what's happening there. So those are the lots of pieces, and I'll have the links in the description for all of these different things I'm talking about. So to go back over the checklist is you have a license, you have at least the player's handbook, you have some content, that you can work with. You have a standard license or subscription, whatever. Then you get the modules, which are on the DM's Guild, and also Matacure's link fill is on the DM's Guild. And then you come to the Fantasy Grounds Forge, and you pick up some of these Mad Nomad things to help automate your character building and such. So you can get by with just the Rob2e coding effects, but if you want the stuff added automatically onto your character sheets and that sort of thing, then you want to get these extensions. So it just depends on what you want to do. So the next thing is I'm going to, now we're going to go to Fantasy Grounds, but I just wanted to make that clear. So some of this stuff's paid, or most of it's paid, and some of it's free. So it just depends on what you need. So the next step is to go into Fantasy Grounds. Now I've set up a new campaign, and it is the 5e rule set that I'm going to be using. And then for the extensions, you have to, after you have updated Fantasy Grounds, after you purchase those extensions on the Forge, you update Fantasy Grounds, it'll pull those in. And you want to go with this, the core, Mad Nomad's core. He's got the automatic actions, and there's Matacure's link fill. So those are the bare minimums. If you want the Rob2e module updater, you can do that as well. Last time I loaded, there was a little bit of a bug or something with it that probably needs to be updated. And then there is pretty much, that's all I have. And then I have a font thing that Matacure made, but that's not as important, but that's a font that goes into the chat window. So after that, I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And there's going to be some pop-ups that come up as it's kind of important the first time around. So when this loads, I'll show you the rest of the steps that you need to take to help automate the character creation process in regards to adding the effects automation that is possible in the DnD5e rule set. So as that's loading, I wanted to say that Fantasy Grounds Academy is having a event at the end of this month. It's Founders Day 6 or Founders Day Weekend 6. We're going to have some guests, we're going to have some games, and we're going to have a bunch of fun. So that'll be at from the 28th through the 30th, and that'll be all weekend. And it looks like, yeah, so we got a little bit of a string updater error here from the, yeah, so it's just a bug that will eventually get worked out. So I'm not going to worry about it too much, but I'll close that. And this is your campaign setup. So you want to at least load the 5e core rules, which are the monster manual, the player's handbook, and the DM's guide. You don't have to have those, but if you just want the player's handbook, you click on modules, and I'm just going to type in players, and that will give me the player's handbook. So it's critical that you have at least that. The rest of it's kind of gravy, but I'll go ahead and load that, and we'll just leave it at that. I don't want to load every single book, but I'll do that for now. And then I'll hit this little bubble, show on load, get rid of that, hit next, and then finish, and that finishes that. So the Mad Nomad thing here is basically a way to update your catalog of Mad Nomad products. So I'm going to have it say only show when there's an update, and then I'm only going to show the loaded ones, which is that. And you can close that. It won't pop up again for quite some time. Now this is the Rob2e module updater. So what this does is everything that you have loaded in your library, which is done automatically initially. So if I go to modules, this is all these things here. So what this is going to do is help cut down this amount of modules that you have to have loaded. So it's going to pull in the data from these and from wherever they're sourced from, and update them without needing to load the modules after this first go around. The first time you do this, those have to be open, and you have to have those in your folder for your modules. But after that, I'm going to click on load data and close. So it's going to install the latest available data for your selected modules, even if those modules are not activated or updated. it will install directly to the campaign instead of the module data. So this is going to write all of the codes into the campaign data instead of having to load modules every time. But you have to do this for each campaign. So if you're going to do a whole new campaign, you'll have to set it up the first time. Once you do that, then you can go back to using just the automatic updater, and you don't have to load all these modules. You could go without those. But you have to have them open the first time, or at least they have to be in your folder for the Fantasy Grounds directory and the modules folder. So now that it's happened, I'm going to click on only show when there's updates, and then I'm going to click on load new and close. But before I do that, I want to show you something. So what this is doing is it's going to basically add any background information. It's going to add your class features, your feats, and races, and it's going to add anything like spell related is where these are all stored. So when you look at this, you'll see that there's these 5e effects coding spells. That's all the modules that are loaded. But what's going to happen is when I do this operation here, it's going to add duplicates of those, and I'll show you how to deal with that. So I'll go ahead and hit load new data and close. So you have to let it do its thing. It's going to freeze. It might take a few minutes depending on how much stuff you have. And then once the modules are converted over to the campaign data, then we can go in and deactivate all the modules. So I'll show you that in a sec. So I'm going to go ahead and click load new data and close. It's kind of frozen for a moment as it pulls in the updates from Rob2e Coding Effects Automation modules. So that way when you're building your characters, it will pull from the campaign data instead of from the modules, and then you can use those within that campaign. But if you start a new campaign, you have to do this process again. The other way to work around that is just to leave the modules loaded and just manually add them to your characters as needed. That's the way it used to be done, but if you want to do it a little bit more automated, you can do this process that I'm showing you now. There is ways that you can build using the character builder, or you can use it the manual way and then also use this updater, which is going to add the effects automatically to your character sheet. It just really depends on what's been updated, what sort of things you need, that sort of thing. But with the player's handbook, it's not too complex. There's only so many things that will be added depending on the character build. So I'm going to actually build a dwarven character, and it will have the automation added automatically, including the links and the descriptions, because I used Matakire's link fill extension to pull those from the book. If you don't have the player's handbook loaded, it will not give you the descriptions or the details of your spells, features, class related and class and race related features too. So those are things that will be added if you are going to use this sort of setup and use these extensions for Fantasy Grounds. So this is for the DnD5e rule set. If you're going to use Pathfinder or some of the other rule sets, they have a completely different way of doing this stuff. And I don't think there's any specific paid modules. I think a lot of the automation is either built in or the community's built it, and it's on either the Forge or within the Fantasy Grounds forums. So that's another thing you can look for in regards to Pathfinder, because it has different modules for it that are community made. They're all free. And like I said, Pathfinder 2 has a lot of the automation built into it. So there isn't a need for a lot of these things that we're showing here because it's already built into the rule sets, which is really nice. So some people had asked why it's not built into the DnD5e rule set. Well, at the time when they first implemented it, it was pretty basic, and the community kind of came behind them and did all the work. So it's just a matter of timing and need. And at that time, everyone was still kind of playing manually anyway. So the automation really didn't start picking up until about 2016. And by 2018, it was kind of a thing. And now it's kind of expected. A lot of this stuff is kind of over the top. So when you see that, and when you are wondering or expecting for all this automation to be there, it depends on the rule set, really. And by the way, I forgot to click the load new data and close, so it doesn't normally take that long. So I'm going to be waiting for that to load, and I'm just kind of explaining some of the history behind this, these effects coding, because there's people out there who would say, well, why isn't this already part of the rule set? Well, it just depends on who built it, when it was built. This rule set's kind of old, so it's been around for a while, and that was well before all of this automation was even a thing. And then on top of that, the newer rule sets have the opportunity to include that because the developers and the people that are involved with setting it up realize that the people want the automation. Fantasy Grounds is going to give you about 65%, and then the rest of it you normally have to develop yourself. But some rule sets are more developed than others. Some don't need automation, like Call of Cthulhu doesn't need a lot. It just depends on what the game system is about and how it works, and then also what your needs are at the table. Because some people don't even use any of this stuff. They just run the game and they just work around it manually. So it just depends on your needs. But some of the SmiteWorks team has gone back in and added some of the more common codes that belong into the DnD5e rule set. But it is not comprehensive. It doesn't cover everything. It only covers some of the basics that most people want. But if you want something a little bit more thorough or more up-to-date and also a little bit more streamlined, then you can get some of these Rob2e coding effects, or you can get Grim Press's automatic effects. I believe that's what they call that. And it kind of works similarly. You have an extension and you have modules. And when you add it to your character sheet, it doesn't come on there until you put it in your combat tracker. Then it will show up on your character sheet. So it works a little differently, but it does the same thing. So there are other options. Some people don't like the cost. They're saying one is cheaper than the other. I honestly, the only reason I'm really using this is because I know about it and kind of grew into it. So it's taken me quite a while to kind of get used to it, and also to consider how it's been updated and how it's been implemented in the past. So there's quite a bit of history behind it, more so than anything else. So it's one of those things where it's kind of like the community grew up around the rule set, and then some rule sets kind of set a standard, and they kind of make it to where others believe that it should be for everything. But actually, each rule set is developed by a different developer, and they have different requirements. So it really depends on what it is that you're doing and what rule set you're using. So it's a long history of growth and things that have been added to kind of make the job of the GM a little easier, and sometimes even the players. But at least it brings the players some more options and the GMs, so that they can actually make their games go a little quicker. But initially, it takes some time to get used to using them and how to use them and when. So there's those things that would potentially trip you up a little bit in the beginning, but once you get used to it, it's not so bad. So this is updating now, and once it's done, this window will close, and I will go in and I will take and remove the modules from the game or from this actual session, and there will be leftover rewritten campaign data for this particular session. So I won't have to rely on loading the modules anymore. They'll be written to the campaign. So let's go into this. So I'm going to close all these for right now. And if you ever use the extensions and the modules, they're mostly stored in spells. And then you have all of these different Rob2e modules here. So what you have here are all these duplicates. So this is the one from the module, and this is the one that was written from the Nomad implementation. So we're going to go ahead and disable the Rob2e module. So if I go to activation, and then I'm just going to filter to the stuff that's loaded, I can actually unload all this stuff. So this kind of helps with overhead. If you're running with a lot of modules and you have a lot of things loaded, this will help cut down on that so you don't have 50,000 things loaded. And it will also make it to where you can automatically update this, the stuff that you have in your campaign. And it will help with kind of keeping everything tidy and not having 50 million books loaded. And there is a module that I want to load that isn't really a part of this package, but I think it's just as important. And that's the conditions and effects. So this is another Rob2e product. It's probably one of my favorite modules. And it essentially adds the automation for NPCs if they don't have it. So if you go to the effects up on the top right, it will allow you to access those. So I'm going to bring my pointer up so you can see what I'm doing. And basically, up here in the modules, like I already deactivated most of them. The only one I loaded is the 5e condition effects, and that thing is kind of separate from the topic, but essentially you can get to that from the effects area. And on the right hand side here are all these different effects that were added. So this would be handy. There's like 10 pages worth of these. These are handy for if you have NPCs that don't have a lot of the automation setup that you want on them. These will help. You can drag them to Combat Tracker or onto your NPC, and it will help with that. But anyway, so back to this topic here. So now that I have unloaded, I have all of these things, and it says RTEMU. So Rob2e probably module updater is what that means. And those are the only things I have loaded now that are from Rob2e's modules, because they're all written to the campaign instead of being a separate module that you have to load. So now that those are in there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a character sheet and build it, and it's going to add the things automatically. So the things being the racial traits, any of the features, sometimes even items, depending on what it is that's in your inventory. So I'll use the character wizard, even though it kind of conflicts with it, but not too bad. It's working better now than it had before. So I will go ahead and go to player, and I'm going to build a dwarven cleric because it's going to show us a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go to the character wizard. I'm going to pick dwarf because that's one that commonly has most of the automation examples. So I picked hill dwarf, and then I get a tool proficiency. So I'm going to go ahead and click I'll go with the Mason's tools. And now for class, I'm going to pick cleric because that's an easy class and it shows a lot of the things that we need to look at. And then you have proficiencies. So I'm going to go with history and religion, or actually I will go with religion and medicine. And then you get a domain. So in this case, I'm going to go with the light domain. And then you have domain spells that will automatically be added to your sheet well, they don't necessarily automatically, but it gives you a list of the spells that you're supposed to get. So if we go up to level 3, we can have some of these, depending on, but this is the light domain. I wanted life. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to go to abilities. I'm just going to do the point by, or actually standard array, and I'll move these around. So this is going to go to my wisdom, which is the strength. I'll leave 8 in charisma, 12. We got 15 in con, so I'm going to move that around. So now we have a, let's see, how does that work? No, I want that there. Okay, so we got 10, 13, 16, 12, 16, and 8. So that's the build, including the racial bonuses. And now I'm going to go to background, and I'm not going to pick Acolyte because that has some doubling up on skills. So I'm going to go with Folk Hero or something like that. That way a lot of the abilities and the skills don't overlap. And then I'm going to get one more tool proficiency. So I'm going to go with, let's see, there's alchemy. Is there brewers? Yeah, brewer supplies. There we go. So I get one of the artisan tools for brewer supplies, so I can make my own alcohol, essentially. What dwarf wouldn't want to? And then in the equipment, I can pick whether I'm going to do the starting kit or wealth. I'm going to go with the starting kit, which is going to give me like the priest type stuff. And then I get a background kit, so I had Mason's tools. And then for this, for the choice number 1 for a weapon, I'm going to go with the Warhammer. And for my weapons, or for my armor, I'm going to go with chainmail. And then I get a secondary weapon, so light crossbow. And then I'm going to take the priest pack and a reliquary, which is like a symbol or like a little container that has your holy symbol in it. And then when I go to this commit, I can do that there, but I want to go back to class and pick my spells. So there's a tab up here where you can click. And I also want to go up to level 3, so I have more stuff to check out. And then I'm going to go to spells. So I need to pick my 0 level spells. So I'm going to go with, let's see. I want to go to guidance, and what else do I want? Let's go with spare the dying, and then the next one is, let's go with, let's see, there's mending. Oh, I want the light spell. That's usually pretty utility. And then once I do that, I click the first level spells. Like I said, I get bless and a couple other spells. Cure wounds, those are my bonus spells, so I don't have to worry too much. I'm going to do guiding bolt. That's always helpful. Let me see what I got here. So actually, I don't want that. Let's see, go back to there. Where's the light spell at? So you want to pick these ones that have the little symbols after them when you're in this list, because essentially you're picking from two different lists, and one list is from the player's handbook, and then the other one is from Rob2e's coding effects. So you're going to want that. And then you have this cleric channel turn undead for channel divinity. You can also pick that when you're here, because that's one of the things that you get. And then there is the channel divinity preserve life. So you can also pick that while you're here, because those are features that you're going to get with your class anyways. And then, like I said, I need to go in and get light again. Here it is. So I picked the wrong one. So you want the ones that have the little symbols after it and not just the generic ones. And then I'm going to go back to my first level spells. And I want to get rid of this guiding bolt, and I want to grab the right one. So I want to go to level 1 and go to level 1 here. And let's see what we get. So I want to have, let's see, there's Bane, Bless. I already have Bless, I think. Yeah, Bless and Cure Wounds. So I wanted Guidance. That's the one. Guiding Bolt, excuse me. So I want to pick this one. So there's two here. This is from the Rob2e coding effects. This one is from the player's handbook. They're almost the same, except for that Rob adds this extra coding. We'll talk about that later, or the extra description, I should say. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to grab Healing Word since we're here. And then I'm going to go to level 2. And I think Aid is a good spell. And then maybe Hold Person. Prayer of Healing. And let's see what else we got. Maybe, oh, Spiritual Weapon. Okay, so there's two. There's one here and the one over here, which is the actual Rob2e version. So that's good enough for now for spells. So once you have satisfied all these different tabs up here, once I hit commit, like once I put a name on here, it's going to basically, I'm going to put my character name, level 3 cleric. So that way, if I need to use this in another game, I'll know what it is. And then it will help me keep that in mind. And then once you hit save, what's going to happen is it's going to write the character sheet. And with all those extensions that I have loaded, it's going to pull over the automation, if there is any, for the content that I have. which includes all these features here. And then it also has some other things that it's going to pull over, like if I have any gear that's going to have automation attached to it, it's going to do all that stuff. So let me go back to equipment, and I'm going to add an item or two. So I want to do a potion before I get too far, because I don't want to have to come after the fact. So I'm going to go with healing potion. I'm just going to add one. And then that should be it. So now I'm going to hit commit and save. Now, once you've done that, you can't go back and change it very easily. So make sure you check all that stuff before you go. So if you look here on the left, it's added a whole bunch of crap onto the character sheet. So now what I'm going to do is expand this out so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take a look at the sheet. And you want to assign yourself a portrait if you're going to do so. So I don't think that's as important for the show, but for character creation, it is. So if you're going to be building dwarves or anything in your games, you'll have to go through all this stuff. And this is more catering to people who haven't used effects automation or they're new to Fantasy Grounds. So hopefully this will help a little. It can also cause a lot of confusion. So a lot of moving parts to this if you're going to do this way. It kind of helps if you're familiar with the interface and you have an idea of how this stuff works. So now I'm going to actually go to the Actions tab, and what you're going to see here is a ton of things that have been added depending on what you're going to get. So the Fantasy Grounds added every single one of the channel divinities, whereas these things here, these two, are the only thing that I need for the cleric build. And then there are some stuff in here that I don't really need, but I'll keep the stone cunning because that's one thing. Dwarven resilience, disciple of life, those are important. So what I'll do with those is I'll drag this into a new group. So I'm going to go down and click this add power down here, and I'm going to edit the list. I'm going to add the power, and I'm going to call this racial traits, just in case. And these were things that were added in by both Fantasy Grounds and by the effects automation extension. So these are all the spells. These are the cantrips. But these two things here are not, they're not actually cantrips, but they were put in there because I chose them when I added it to the character sheet. So what I want to do here is take these and expand them, kind of open them up. So here's the Turn Undead and the Channel Divinity, and then the Disciple of Life. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag these into this new area. So this is the, I need one more. So I'll just say Cleric Domain, and then, Cleric Domain. And then I will put Life Cleric or something like that so that I know what this stuff is about. And then I'm going to take and drag these in there so that they go into the right place. So let me make sure that I first have this. Okay, so take this, drop it in there. And this is going to separate these out for that domain. And now I can pretty much get rid of most of this stuff, but I want to get the Stone Cunning and the Dwarven Resilience out of here. And I'll take these and drag and drop those into here so that they can be added and I don't have to worry about adding them again. And then I'm going to get rid of this placeholder because I don't need the first thing here. So okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to get rid of this whole group here, I think, if it'll let me. So if I go to the edit, yeah, I got to individually delete all this stuff. So that's one thing that I don't like is it adds everything and you don't use all this stuff. You only need certain ones. So it just kind of, depends. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and move these out. Anything that was Fantasy Grounds added, I'm going to take those out because they're just stuff from for other classes and such. We don't really need them. Okay, so these are the race traits. These are cantrips. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up because these things don't belong in here. Okay, so now we have the racial abilities, race traits, and then we have the domain stuff up here. And I'm going to collapse these and get out of edit mode so you can see what this looks like when it's not all expanded out. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse these. So we have Disciple of Life. We have this Cleric Divinity, Channel Divinity, Turn Undead. We have Preserve Life. And then we also have our spells here and our cantrips, and then we have the race traits. So these are basically like class features for the Cleric. So there are spells that belong in this domain area because they are free, given to you by the class features. So I know Bless is one of them. So I'm going to put that in my life domain. And I know that Cure Wounds is one of them. So these don't have to exist down here. They don't count against your total. And let me see what else we get, because there is another couple spells. See, this Preserve Life, Channel Divinity, and we want the Disciple of Life, Divine Domain, Life Domain spells. So Lesser Restoration, so I'm going to have to add that manually because I forgot to grab that. So if you need to add or adjust anything manually, you come over to the spells. In this case, this is going to be a coding, effects coding for spells. And I'm going to go to just search for it. It's easier than trying to filter. So I want to say that, what was that called again? Lesser Restoration, Spiritual Hammer. So these are the ones I need to grab. So Lesser Restoration is what I want to grab. And that frees up some of your spells for prepared spells. But here's Lesser Restoration. So if I drag and drop this into the Life Cleric area, that'll be in there. And then the other one was Spiritual Hammer. So I'm going to drag and drop that one up here into my life domain. I'm going to delete it off my prepared spells for this section. So Bless, Cure Wounds, Lesser Restoration, and Spiritual Weapon. So those are the main spells, and also the spells that I'm getting from my class domains in the background. And then up here under life domain, I'm going to open up to expand this. I'm actually going to put this under wisdom, and that's just in case, so that if anything has a saving throw or anything like that around it, all I have to do is add it there, and then to update, reparse the actions in case the DC challenge rating or whatever is not right. And then when you expand these, you'll notice that some of these, like this had the DC of 13. When I first added it, it said 8. So, and then it said 10 because it wasn't assigned to any particular ability. And now that I put in wisdom, it knows to key off of that. So that's the only one in here that really has a save that I can tell. So that helps with that. And then your race traits are here. Here's your spells. Okay, so there's that. So to get the items to work is kind of the same way. It would add the automation. So I have a potion. Let's see if that healing potion came up. Yeah, potion of healing. So let me see if that works. So I'm going to add it manually and see if that adds it to the Actions tab, because it didn't do it through the character wizard. So I'm wondering if that blocks it. So I want to go ahead and take the, I'm going to go to the campaign data and go to items. And I'll see if we actually have anything on there for this. So I'll go with healing, and I'll add another one to the inventory. Yeah, here's our potion of healing. And let's see if we'll see if it actually added this in. Yeah, so for some reason it didn't automate that. Maybe I don't have that activated, but generally it'll set up an area on your sheet and it will add the item. So, interesting. All right, so this is basically how the character goes, and a lot of this automation gets added in if you have the extensions loaded and the content. So maybe I didn't have the module open or something, but nonetheless, this is how this stuff works. Now, it's not always going to be this cut and dry. You're going to have to make some tweaks and some changes depending on what your build is like. And then there might be some things that aren't covered or that cannot be automated. So you have to remember that too. But essentially, this is how this works. I'm going to also come into the spell level here. It says prepared for. Okay, so now we'll go to preparation mode. And I'm going to go ahead and prepare these so they show up, which by clicking on these little bubbles. And the stone cutting is situational. The dwarven resilience, you'll activate that as soon as you go on the combat tracker. So when you're GM or when you are setting up for your players, you put the cleric on the combat tracker, and whoever's playing this actual character will come over and add the dwarven resilience, which will automatically give them advantage on saving throws versus poison. If they fail, then they get a resist poison on that. So this kind of what that helps do is remind you about the saving throw, and then it gives you the resistance against poison, which reduces the damage. So dwarves kind of have a cool feature there. And then all of these little symbols next to these descriptions, they do mean something. So if you've loaded Rob2e's effects coding module, there's a key to what these mean. But usually a number is for range, T is for touch, C means that it's a concentration spell. If there's a B there, that's a bonus action. And there are an equal sign means that it has a token. So if you subscribe to the other extensions like Diablo Bob's and B9's spell tokens, that tells you that there's a spell token for it. And then the little T is touch, of course. It's if you see a dollar sign, that means it requires a paid component to cast a spell. But mostly these brackets with the parentheses with the number in there is the range. I don't remember what the plus is for, but you have, that might be, let's see, that's hold person, so that's probably some kind of symbol. I don't remember what that, and the percentage, I don't remember what that's for, but those are just little keys to what they do for spellcaster to make it easier to identify what the spells can do. So you'll know immediately which spells require touch, which ones are ranged, which ones are bonus actions, that sort of thing. So that really speeds things up, so you're not having to look up the spell. Speaking of looking up a spell, so if I want to look up guidance to see what it does, if I don't have the link extension, this little link here won't be there. So it won't give you a whole lot of this description down below. So this links straight to the player's handbook. And if you have the player's handbook loaded, it will add this description in and it'll pull it in with that link fill. But if you don't have it, you're not going to get this description. So that's why I recommend getting that as well. Because when you're doing this and it's automating the process, even though you have the effect on here, it's not necessarily going to give you the extension or the description unless you have the book loaded in your library. And that's very important. So players need to have the player's handbook activated as well as the DM when they're building a character, so it pulls over the description. Now this is in regards to using the automation, Nomad's automatic effects, and Rob2e's effects coding automation. So this is just kind of another thing that adds into it. So a lot of moving pieces here. So let's recap. So what we did is we got Rob2e's coding effects. We made a new campaign. We also, before we started, we loaded in Nomad's extensions and Matakire's link fill. And then when we got to character creation, we started building the character. And as we build it, these things are added to the character sheet. So it kind of works similarly with the manual drag and drop. it will add those depending on what it is that you're building. And then if you go into the settings and you go down to the bottom, there is a thing that says show basic actions if you want that to be included on your sheet. And then auto load Rob2e modules. So once you're done with this, you can actually turn that off. So the next time you come into the campaign, the modules won't show up again. If you don't turn that off and you load this up, all the modules will be back where they are. It's not a horrible thing, but the whole idea with having it automated like that was to remove the dependability on having to have those modules loaded and just updating the campaign data instead. So that's one of the things that can occur depending on how you're building your characters. So you've used the character wizard. I think it sometimes clashes with the automatic effects extension because they're both trying to add separate things at the same time. I would say that you're probably safer to build the same character with drag and drop method using that extension. So if you wanted to, you could actually create a new character. And I'll just kind of go through this really quick. I'm not going to explain much of it, but I'll do the acolyte, and then I'll add the race. So in this case, I'm going to go and add the dwarf. And then it's going to ask me which dwarf. So I'll say hill dwarf. And then I'm going to go to class and level. And I'll grab the classes. And I'll grab cleric, drag and drop that. And then it's going to ask me for my 2 skills. So I'll go ahead and do medicine and religion. And then I'm going to use the life domain. And then when you want to level up, you just drag this little link in here a few times. That gives you your levels. And then when you actually go to build the character and you'll take a look at the actions tab, it's already added all this stuff automatically from Fantasy Grounds. But you got, see, this FGU added is what all the stuff that was added. And then some of this stuff is useful, but some of it isn't. So it depends on what you're building and such. But you can do it that way too, without using a character wizard. But I can see it's kind of, well, what really happened here is that they have 2 different ways to build this character. So without even Rob2e's effects coding, all that, it will add some of this, but it won't be as thorough. So what I typically do is I don't use any of the extensions, and I build the entire thing manually. So I don't want any of this stuff added automatically because it drives me nuts. I got to go and delete everything, but that's just part of the way they got it set up. And on this case, it's kind of like all or nothing, you know, without getting into a bunch of extensions. So that's why it adds all of these things in here. But that's just a kind of an idea of how those extensions work and how they play together. So there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different things that have to come together. But I have at the end of the video, after I'm done here shortly, it'll have all the links to this sort of stuff. I'm going to actually add this effects automation link for the wiki Atlassian guide, so you can learn what all this stuff does. You can make your own. But then I also have the links to the Forge links, and also to the DM's Guild and the Forge. So if you are wanting to do this, I would recommend actually getting familiar with the character build process the vanilla way, and then start adding this stuff in as you go. Because the more stuff you add, the more complex and confusing it's going to get. So be careful with that. I prefer that, you know, we kind of learn how to do it before we start piling on more stuff, because it can get really, really convoluted and you're going to get confused and everything else. So if you learn the basics, it's much easier to troubleshoot if you have any problems. So anyways, happy Friday. Have a good weekend, everybody. And hopefully this helps a little bit. I know that was a lot of stuff to go over. I've been rambling for about an hour, but hopefully